All right, so we're calling the meeting to order at 8:01. We have a single item on our agenda, which is to review our rate setting from last week. Ooh, last week. And I don't think we have any public comment. So with that, we can move right into the management team talking to us about the rate setting.
Chris, do you want to
I
lead?
I can.
Okay.
So I think you all have been prefaced. We know we're here for a positive reason. We're proposing that the rates actually that you set be reduced. So that's the good news. I just want to, I think you've all had different conversations with different members of the management team now. There was some, but to sum it up, there was some miscommunication between what the actuaries presented to us this year in their reports and compared to what we had seen in previous years. We're pretty sure that it was never presented quite this way before. All 4 members on the management team, including Allison Plant at Blue Cross, all expressed confusion when we look back at it. You know, even Allison was struggling with it. All 4 of us ahead of time had looked at it. We were confident we knew what we were looking at the, you know, the 10.8 being a break-even year. So what basically happened is that there's Blue Cross Blue Shield creates what they call the language is called a pro forma rate. The pro forma rate is the rate that they develop that says you're going to need this to make a break-even year. Okay. Then beyond that, we, as a board, you vote to add percentage 2, 3, 4, whatever, to add to or to rebuild our surplus. So those are important. There's the build rates, which is what we actually went out and build, which has some rebuild of surplus in it. And then there's these pro forma rates, which are the break-even calculation. So when the actuary communicated to us, they communicated 10.8, and that was pro forma last year to pro forma this year. We thought that was billed to pro forma. So I was given a number that said, this is the amount of contributions you're going to collect at 10.8%. And that's what I built all my numbers off of. That was the base. So, but really, that was 10.8% from pro forma last year to pro forma this year. Well, we built in 3.7% to rebuild surplus last year. So when you look at it from a build to pro forma, it was 7.1. So right there, we were just off that 3.7%, and it just dragged right through all of my calculations because that base number was incorrect. So anybody have any questions on that piece? And I guess what I'd like to say also is that we have taken measures, or we will be taking measures to make sure that this never happens again. So that's always my mantra is, what did we learn from this? My parents laugh. I've been saying it since I was 3 years old. I said this little, I'd be like, well, what did we learn from it? You know, how obnoxious. But anyways, but it's held true and good for me over the years. You know, we made a mistake. Let's figure out what happened, and we will move forward to make sure this never happens again. We're going to redefine how we communicate with the actuaries and make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward.
Simple
Yes,
question
Lisa.
that may not be a very good question, but does that 3.7% translate up the board? In other words, do you just subtract 3.7% and that's what you get?
Well, that's, you know, so there's an exhibit that I prepared, which is similar to what you looked at the other night, with all the different rates. So pretty much, yes. I mean, there's a small skewing in how it affects surplus, but yeah, pretty close. If you go to an 11.5 from the 15.2, you are pretty much right where you would have been to a target, a surplus target, at the 15.2, the assumption we previously made.
But part of what the work that we've done is, we made the decision, or you all helped, we all came to the decision of the 15.2 because we wanted to do what the market could bear. We didn't want to, we were just trying to keep it as low as possible, but get as much as possible, finding that kind of sweet spot, that balance. So now that we have a little more wiggle room there, do we want to try and get above the originally we were targeting, was it 13.8, Chris?
Yes,
targeting
yes.
at
If we
15.
have a $6 million gain on FY25, the year we're in, with a 15.2, that was going to bring us to about a 13.8% target.
And Chris had also,
yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say you had also prepared the no gain, just the flat year, which I think we
Right.
kind of went off of, and that was more like 12.2 was what we were.
Correct.
You want to show that?
Yeah.
The chart?
Yep.
Yeah. So as you can see down on line 7 here, so this first section of the chart, like last time, assumes the $6 million gain for FY25. This shows you what we previously voted through, 15.2%, targeting us down to a 13.8 ratio. And then down below on line 20, you'll see that's with the break even year. That's what we voted in. So we were, thinking 13.8 or 12.2, depending on how FY25 ended. So, we looked at up above some different options. The 7.1 is basically the line that used to say 10.8. That was our break even year, because I'm going from build now. And 11.9 would get us to like 14.4 or 12.8 if we had a break even year. Now, honestly, I don't see how we're going to gain $6 million this year personally. So my focus is more on the second chart. But the first chart is what the actuaries are projecting. So, it's important we take that into consideration as well. But we were thinking, we could probably go to 11.9 to get a little bit more rebuild on the reserves. Yes, John.
I just want to jump in. And when we talked this weekend and Bobby, Joe, and Chris said it's 7.1, that made me feel like Chris, which was, boy, that seems low. Like with the years we've had and where we are right now, 7.1 seems a little scary. I know that's what the actuaries say, but to say we only need 7.1 and we're going to make 6 million is, I think, really optimistic. So I lean like Chris toward the break even year. And do you have the other chart, Bobby Joe, or we just have these two?
No, yeah, I do.
Yeah, so
Yeah, and then
Chris even made another one. So
yeah, this one is if we had a $7 million loss, because I just wanted to see what that would play out to. And remember, last year it was $15 million loss before investments. So this still isn't necessarily worst case scenario, but at least it gives you an idea. So, if we went with the 11.9, if we had a $7 million loss this year, we would still be at 11%. As a reminder, we're at 10% right now. So it would still be a small rebuild.
So 11.9 gets us to a good place in any scenario.
Right. So going back to your question about Lisa, about the 3.7, if we deduct the 3.7, it brings us to 11.5. But because we're looking at a different set of numbers now, we felt we could probably go to 11.9. Still, at least it's a smaller 2-digit increase. Keeps us underneath that 30% for 2 years at least. We're might be more at like 28. So that's
Mike
where
has
we're
a
at.
hand up.
Mike has his hand up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see him.
Yeah, thank you,
Hi, Clayton.
Suzanne. Question about the net position. Have we dropped to the rate that we're like 10 something now? Has that happened before? And if so, what did the organization do? How did they set rates that year?
I would have to go back and really look at the history. I think it's been a while since we've been at that low. I mean, I would say that there may have been a time, for a lot of years we didn't have this target. Okay. The target used to be like 20%. Correct, Mark? Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
when I first joined VEHI, this would have been 2001 or two. I asked about the target and they said, oh, it's 20%. And I said, how did you get to
Yeah.
20%? And the answer was, well, that's just kind of how it is or what it's been. It wasn't ever really formalized. And then years later,
Right.
we did formalize it at 15% based on actuarial guidance.
Right. But I would say that that formal policy was probably maybe 10 years ago now.
Yeah, roughly. That's a good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of guessing, but it's not, it's fairly recent in comparison to the organization, the policy. So, and since that's happened, I mean, at that time when we established the 15% target, our surplus was way higher. And so the ratio was significantly higher. I mean, at one point we had 60 million in surplus.
Yeah, it's
And
about
that's when,
64 million.
yeah, and that's when we had certainly a lot lower expenses back then too.
The
So
state treasurer also became concerned about the amount of money that we had in reserve because it
right,
was actually in excess of 20% at one point.
right. So we knew we needed to bring that down, so there was that happened. So I don't know if in recent years, I don't think we've dropped to 10%. I think this is probably the lowest since we've had the policy. I'd have to look to be absolutely sure, but I think this is probably the lowest we've been.
So at the end of the net position policy, which is posted on our website, there is a chart that has everything, the last years up to 2018. So we could probably update that too. And in it looks like 2015, the net position was 9.6.
Okay.
And then the next year it bopped up to 12.8. So we'd have to look and see what did we do during that time. But we were working with different plans and everything was different then.
True.
Cheryl's hands up.
So it's great news. I'm just trying to understand it. And so now I feel very kind of like new to like trying to understand how it came about, which is neither here nor there. But I guess what I'm thinking about is, so we've had such big increases and all we're hearing about is how everything is costing more and blah, blah, blah. But now we have this good news that we're going to come in lower. Like, how do we explain that? I mean, and granted, 11.9 being lower is just relative to where we've been. Because what was the increase before last year? Was it under 10%?
Might have been 9.9.
Trying to find it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm just like trying to, in like layman's terms. So despite, I mean, because it
Well,
doesn't seem like the narrative out there has been changing in any way about the high cost of everything. So I think everybody was expecting it to
Right.
come in
Cheryl,
high.
I
It will
think
come in a little lower.
I think one response, and this was true actually last year as well, even though we came in at a 16.4, and I think 2.6%, if I remember correctly, was to build net position last year. The hospital budgeting process this year may have saved us about 2 percentage points, give or take. Had the Green Mountain Care Board not taken the action that it did, this 11.9 is probably more than 13%. So I think that's probably the decisive factor. And the one other thing we have in our favor at the moment is the most expensive medication that's been on patent for 2 decades, Humira, is now moving to a generic. And that is going to save us some significant money over the course of the next year or more. But I think the hospital budgeting process has shaved maybe 1.5 to 2 points off of this 11.9. Otherwise, we'd be right back where we'd be roughly in the 13 to 14% range again.
I thought we asked that, Mark, when we met with the actuary, and I thought it was closer to 3. It was.
Yeah, it could have been
There's-
3.
It was
Yeah.
There
pretty
was 3%.
significant.
Yeah, there was 3% that was directly related to pharmacy. I think one was rebates and 1% was rebates and 2% was the Humira change.
Yeah.
And
So we
that's like
were-
a one-time thing though, right? I mean,
Yeah, right. So this year we got lucky in both of those regards. And so, yeah, I mean, to John and Bobby Joe's point, we're probably closer to 15% without those changes. And, we can work that into our narrative. But I think that's why the 11.9 came out the way that it did this year.
It didn't go down because claims have suddenly gotten better. That's for sure.
Right.
Right, that's
Yeah.
like, is
Right.
that what people are gonna infer, like,
Yeah, no, it's not as, that the question's really important. It doesn't portend this major shift. We just got lucky at hospital budgets and RX this year.
okay.
Because I was wondering, Cheryl, what, as a business administrator, what your reaction to 11.9 and what you think the group would think when that comes out.
Well, I think the group will be very happy with 11.9 considering where we've been. So I don't think that will be an issue. And I don't think schools will necessarily have a lot of questions about why is it that. I'm just thinking out in the press that, everybody's been talking about how it's going to be so high and all these things, and we're going to come in with something lower and then everybody's expecting, and I'm sure the question is going to be, well, why is that? Is your claims, are you, have claims gone down? What is it that's happening? Because I think we still want to persist with the narrative that claims are up and we need to relook at our plan, design and all that, or we are going to still look at our plan design. It's just a couple things that came together this year that resulted in this increase this year.
I definitely agree. I mean, we're not thinking that, oh, this is great, and we're moving away from all those things we were talking about. Some major change needs to happen. We need to look at other options. Absolutely. I mean, from the finance side, I could look at this and say, you know what, 12.9 would be better.
Yeah.
I mean, to rebuild this, we're still not in a wonderful position. We're not up to 15 yet. But we really wanted to be cognizant of the market and what the taxpayers can bear and what schools can bear. And, we hear you, it's that balancing act. We hear arts programs may need to be cut. So, staff may need to be cut. So it's that fine line on the balance beam of making sure that you're staying sound, but also being cognizant of the world and what this number does to people and people's lives. So I mean, could we go a percentage higher? Absolutely. Would that make the conversation next year easier? Probably. But again, 11.9 is kind of a nice number to be able to relieve some burden.
So do we want to have, are there any other questions, or do people want to weigh in about this?
My only remaining
ahead.
question is not necessarily about the rate, and we can do this after we've made our decision, but getting information out to the field, I think, is really critical, because people, there's a lot of pressure right now to be building budgets, and the information out there has been more like 15% or plus. And so I know there are districts looking at, what the bloodbath that needs to take place in order to, cut their budget. especially ones that are gonna, like, that excess spending threshold is in place this year. There are districts that are dealing with that, and, this might make a big difference, and the sooner that gets out, we get something out to give people a better idea, you're not using 15, you're using something closer to 12. The less angst in terms of what all everybody has to be looking at in order to deal with their budget, that,
Yeah.
I mean, that's real, that what are we gonna cut and what is it,
We agree. Bobby Joe and
those
I
are
have a
really tough
draft monitor
conversations.
done. We're gonna get it out. I think we should be able to get it out to Mike and Suzanne to look at it today. And then we'll
Great.
be ready to speak to this at the annual meeting on Friday. And probably we'll get it out, maybe Bobby Joe before Friday.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I
That
really
would be
hope so.
real, that would be really great, because like I said, everybody's working on it now, so.
That's why we thought it was so important to get in front of you this morning, because we know that
Thanks.
needs to go out. And just to, I know Lance has his, and Andy had their hands raised, but to put a finer point on, we do have it in our messaging that talks about things like, the things that brought the rates kind of down, right? But the fact that the things are still high. So we are trying to address all of those things still yet.
Okay.
Talk about all the points that how we got there.
So Lance and then Andy.
Yeah, when I look at the 11.9 and I think about, the past, say 15 years when I was involved in union leadership, numbers jump up and down all the time. It's not unusual. And I don't think that, looking at the numbers that Bobby Joe, and thank you for doing that she just put into the chat. I mean, we're looking at 5 something 3 years ago, and then it, went up. I don't think that the 11.9 is a ridiculous number. I don't think that we're going to have to do a lot of explaining, for that. So I would actually move that we go with an 11.9% increase for the fiscal year 2026.
A second.
So I just made them all. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll move into more discussion. Andy, your hands up. Thank you, Lance.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to echo everything that Cheryl had said, that I think the messaging is going to be really, really important. And that this is maybe just a blip, and don't get, because I think as we were looking at it, as I said, like 15% wasn't like shocking, but at the same time, I think that the timing is going to be good, because 3 percentage points has a huge impact on budgets as we're trying to plan, and it could be a couple teachers. So that's it.
Well, I think we can all agree that messaging is important, because regardless, and and Cheryl, just a nod to plan design, regardless of what we do with who pays what, at some point rates always go up. And so I don't want people to say next year, if we have a bad year, let's hope not, why did they screw up so badly this year? What happened? And I do believe that VEHI will be under continued scrutiny forever until something changes, and God knows what that is. So we haven't heard from you, Mike.
I'm tracking where this discussion is going, so I didn't feel the need to add in. Yeah.
Well, do we have any more discussion? We have a motion on the floor for 11.9%, and it has been seconded. Anyone feel a need or a question, something to weigh in on? Okay, hearing none, I would ask for a vote. All those in favor of accepting 11.9% as our rate increase for 2026 or 7?
6.
6, thank you. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please say no. All right, we have passed 11.9%. Excellent, thank you. And Cheryl, have we adequately addressed your concern about the information rollout? Because I know Bobby, Joe, and Mark both talked about trying to get something to us today, that being Mike and myself, and then maybe even having it out tomorrow or the next day.
I mean, the sooner the better, honestly. I mean, because it is going to be different, which is going to mean everybody's going to change to something lower. And, for those that have already put it in, it doesn't just click and happen. We do have to do a bunch of work. That's why I was actually starting to go with what we did. And
Yes.
then when I got the phone call, it was like yesterday I was going to be doing that. So anyway, so I held off. That's, everybody is working on it now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, as Mike said, for being very efficient and attentive. Is there any other business this morning? If not, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second?
I'll
All
second
those,
it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Yay!
Mike,
All
we'll
right,
do our
thank you.
best in the future.
That's not enough, Mark. I need a guarantee.
Right. It's true.
All right.
Hey,
Well, we
management
appreciate
team,
it.
can you stick around for just a couple minutes?
Who
Sure.
did you say,
Talk
Mark?
about the
The
communication
management?
thing.
Thanks
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Thank you,
bye-bye.
board
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Mark, I've got an 8:30.
Me
Bobby
too.
Joe, you
Okay,
can
yeah, this will be
stay.
really fast.
Okay.
Bobby Joe, I just realized, I think I realized correctly. Chris, nice job again.
Thank you.
I don't think I mentioned the Green Mountain Care Board decision or the RX thing in the monitor in terms of its influence on this year's rates. I
Okay,
can throw a quick sentence in there and get it
Yeah.
out to you again.
that'd be
Um,
helpful, just because I have
yeah.
the 8:30 and then we're at 9.
Yeah, I'll do it right
Yeah.
now, and then we're meeting at 9 again, right?
Yeah,
All right,
perfect.
cool.
Sounds good.
All
All right,
righty.
folks, thanks.
Guys,
All right.
off your
Thanks.
vacation.
Oh, yeah, have a fun vacation.
Yes, please.
Go back to bed,
Right.
Chris.
Exactly.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.